Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I just need to check something here. Okay, sorry. See me up close there, but yeah, this is an educational channel. Welcome, and we generally focus on the most obscure theories of everything that you can think of. Today is video number 262 on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson, a theory that he derived back in the 20th century. He wrote a lot of books on chemistry and physics and astronomy and metaphysics and economics, and some of his followers have taken up the mantle after he died back in 1990 or even before then, and have written a number of articles on quite a few different subjects and a few books even that have come out. And yeah, so he never really had a very big following, but a few dozen people, maybe even more. And I think the theory itself is a little bit endangered, and and I think it's a great system. Uh, it, if you understand the system, you can apply it in myriad different ways, and so that's what we're looking at. And to me, it's very simple and it makes sense. I mean, it's not simple, but compared to, like, given what you're learning, if you're learning chemistry and astronomy and physics, it's way simpler than, if you studied those things the legacy science way. And it's more simple because it is Occam's razor. you know the the simplest explanation is the one that is usually correct. And I think that's true in Larson's case, in this case of the reciprocal system. The basic idea is that we don't live in a universe of matter or a universe of energy. We live in a universe of motion. And for Larson, motion was the relationship between space and time. Motion is basically a fraction, with space or time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator, with the caveat that time or space comes in 3 or more dimensions. Time or space also has its scalar aspect. A scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude but has no particular direction, like the flow of time. Um, Time is always moving, always getting later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And space, too, is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, but in no particular direction, which was identified by the Hubble telescope as all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. And the further away they are, the faster they are moving away from each other. And that is the progression of space. Larson calls that clock space and clock time. The other he calls coordinate space and coordinate time. And then also the discrete unit postulate. Space and time come only in discrete units. There's a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. And less than 1 unit of space, and you don't have space. And they come in only integers, and also integral fractions. So you can have 1, you can have 2, you can have 3, you can have 4, you can have 5, but you can't have 4.23, or you can't have pi. You only have integers. On the other side of that, you can have 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5. You really don't have that. That's just the way you see it. If you have, because time and space are reciprocal. And so if you have 2 units of space, um, it can look like 1/2 unit of time. And that's the, kind of the key of the reciprocal system, is that 1 is at the center, whereas in the legacy science system, 0 is at the center. 0, and then +1, +2, 3, 4, and 5. And then on the other side, it would be -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. But in the reciprocal system, it's 1, 2, 1 in the center, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 on the positive end, and then 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5 on the negative end. And so at the negative infinity is actually 0. It's just a multiplicative system instead of an additive system. Anyway, Larson, and so if you have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, then you have the speed of light. And the speed of light is what Larson calls unit speed, and it is the center or the midpoint of our universe. And so on either side, there is a sector of the universe. Larson refers to the material sector as the sector that's moving slower than the speed of light, and the cosmic sector as the sector that's moving faster than the speed of light. Within the material sector, you have what is called the time region, which is where all of the phenomena that occur within 1 unit of space. Because if you don't have a full unit of space, then you don't have space. You only have time. And so that's why he calls it the time region. And on the other side, in the cosmic sector, you have what he calls the space region. And the space region is all the activity that occurs within 1 unit of time. If you don't have a full unit of time, then you only have space. That's what he calls the space region. So you have basically 4 regions. One inner region within the material sector and one within the cosmic sector. And to show the reciprocal relation, to understand the cosmic sector, which we don't, the legacy scientists know very little, if anything, about the cosmic sector. Evidenced by Einstein saying that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe, where the speed of light in Larson's system is the midpoint of the universe, and there's an entire half of the universe that's moving faster than the speed of light. That's the cosmic sector. You can determine what's going on in the cosmic sector through extrapolation, because what's going on in the cosmic sector by the reciprocal postulate is the exact reciprocal of what's going on in the material sector. So basically all you're doing is switching the roles of space and time. So in the material sector, you have coordinate space, 3 dimensions of space, 3 or more dimensions of space, and you have clock time. The clock is always getting later and later and later. But in the cosmic sector, you have to reverse those roles of space and time, and you have coordinate time, 3 or more dimensions of time, and clock space, progressing space. So that shows the material sector. That rule applies with everything else too. What's going on in the cosmic sector is exactly the same as on the grand scale. Like we're not talking about individual things, but on the grand scale in general, what's going on in the cosmic sector is exactly the same as what's going on in the material sector. Now, we may see those things slightly differently. That's due to one of these things called the interregional ratio, and some other things that that have to do with where we're observing from. We're in general observing from the material sector, and so our ability to see the cosmic sector is a little bit reduced, or a lot reduced. So we see only a fraction of what's really going on. So there might be a lot really going on, but we only see some of it. So it doesn't appear to be identical, but it is. Okay, that's just a brief overview. What we're really looking at here today is, again, we're looking at the papers of Daniel Phoenix III. And Daniel Phoenix III is a pseudonym of Dr. Bruce Perret, who was one of Larson's most prominent followers, prominent revisers. And he came up with what you call RS2, the Reciprocal System 2, the reevaluation of the reciprocal system. He made a couple key tweaks to the reciprocal system and advanced the theory into other fields. Was quite speculative, especially in these Daniel papers. But this is paper 4 of his the fourth and final paper of his anthropology series on the hidden origins of Homo sapiens. And we've been working on this paper for 5 or 6 days now. The section that we're about to get to is the arrival of the Cyclopeans. And this occurred, according to Perret, 2 million years ago. And the Cyclopeans were the first basic intelligent species to reside on Earth. And we'll let him take over from there. Based on our updated geochronology, virtually all historical data obtained from fossil records has occurred within the last 2 million years. The start of this eon is referred to as the Cambrian explosion of life, because from out of nowhere, the planet suddenly burst full of diverse life. Now, just recall this Cambrian period, he's saying it was 2 million years ago. That is due to his geochronology. He has a different time cycle, which is very much shrunk. So his beginning of the Earth is not 4.5 billion years ago. Let me see. According to his chart, that 4.5 billion years ago was actually 15 million years ago. And the Cambrian era, according to him, started 2 million years ago, but according to the legacy scientists, it started 542 million years ago. So his time scale is a huge contraction from the conventional. Okay, so out of nowhere, the planet suddenly burst full of diverse life. Reminds me a bit of how Cro-Magnon man showed up out of nowhere just after the Anunnaki arrival. But in this case, it was another race of giants, referred to by George Hunt Williamson as the Cyclopeans. The Cyclopeans were a very advanced race of peaceful, interstellar explorers, having a reputation of being excellent builders and craftsmen. They had explored thousands of solar systems, which conventionally are called galaxies, and like the ancients of the Stargate franchise, reached a point in their evolution that put them on the point of ascension, not to the next density, but to the next octave of existence. Though the Cyclopeans were not plagued with the constant political troublemaking of the Anunnaki descended nobility of humanity, they also found a need and desire to establish their version of a monastery, a place of sanctuary and refuge to focus on their research and personal evolution. And that is what brought them to our newly forming solar system some 2 million years ago. A simple way to understand what went on during this period is look at the early European settlers in American history. They did not arrive in the New World with supercomputers, internet, and cell phones, but with bags of grain, chickens, cows, and horses, most of which were not native to the new land. The Cyclopean colonists did the same thing, arriving in our solar system, selecting this third rock from the sun as the site to build this sanctuary, and started unloading their bags of grains, but from orbit, seeding the entire surface of the planet with life suitable for their needs. Finding fertile volcanic soil and plenty of moisture about, life exploded across the planet, covering the land and the seas, creating farmland for the cyclopean versions of chickens and cows, just like the New England farmers did after arriving from the old world. And they named this new world, formed from the chaos of a supernova remnant, Tiamat, the place of our love. Every planet has its own unique organisms and genetic paths, and Tiamat was no different. When settlers arrived in America, there was already stuff growing there. After introducing the seeds and animals they brought with them, hybridization occurred, much like the combination of a horse and donkey producing a mule. And that happened on Tiamat with the cyclopean stock. An explosion of diverse life, from the microscopic all the way up to many of the creatures we find in the fossil record. With plenty of food, beasts, and building material now available on the planet, the Cyclopeans started building their sanctuary. They were giants in stature, standing some 5 to 7 meters, 15 to 20 feet in height. So their constructions were megalithic by our modern standards. Let's just look at a couple of footnotes here. Cyclopeans comes from cyclopes, meaning one-eyed. Williamson states in his books that the Cyclopeans did have a single eye, but it is difficult to believe that such an advanced race would not have depth perception from the lack of stereoscopic vision. Of the surviving pictographs, the Cyclopeans are depicted as having one large eye, which upon examination could easily have been the visor of a protective helmet, much like our own pilots and astronauts use. The planetary environment was rather unstable in those days, so protective clothing is definitely a possibility. Okay, I think there are other footnotes here, but I think we can proceed without them. Perret writes with a great deal of humor, or at least attempted humor, and so some of the footnotes are just kind of jokes, little jokes, and a lot of them are references to science fiction, and then a lot of them are references to linguistic, different languages. Okay, their technology, based on what we term vibratory physics, allowed them to manipulate inanimate structures easily, such as dissolving rock or fusing it into glass, much in the way that John Keeley demonstrated with his vibratory sympathy machines of the 19th century. They constructed their facilities inside of mountains, opening passageways and fusing the sides into black obsidian glass, a hallmark of their handiwork, connecting the facilities together with high-speed underground transit systems. Upon completion of these worldwide facilities, they were able to settle in and begin their research on ascension to the theta octave. In Cyclopean days, Tiamat was physically about a fourth the size that Earth is now, as it had yet to undergo any major expansion events. Also, being in a gravitational lock with the new sun that was getting hotter by the year, the surface was split into 3 regions. And Perret uses the Norse language to identify them. The one is called Muspelsheimer, the hot, volcanically active region facing the sun. The second is called Niflheimer, the cold, dark side facing away from the sun. And the third is called Ginnungagap, and that was the habitable zone where fire met ice, having reasonable temperatures, lakes, and rivers. If you are familiar with Old Norse mythology, then you will realize that there was a race of ancient Jotnar, or giants, that spawned from colonized Ginnungagap. The Hrimpersar rhyme thurs, or the frost giants. Legends of this first race, some of whom were still around when the Titans arrived to plunder the resources of Tiamat, and the Titans are the Illuminati, the first generation, are found in just about every mythology on the planet, with different names, usually translating as a reference to the wise old ones, such as the elders, the elder race, or Antiquus. These Cyclopean Jotnar, or giants, were a dedicated group that understood the ways of nature and natural processes, which was the point of their study of the theta octave and the path that led to ascension to it. They worked in harmony with the planet, and as a consequence of that, harmonic resonance. Life flourished on Tiamat, soon producing intelligent life. Unlike the Anunnaki genetic engineering, it was just the Cyclopean presence that caused consciousness to evolve at an accelerated rate. As Larson mentions in Beyond Space and Time, anywhere life can exist, life does exist. And intelligent life sprung up all around the globe, on the land, in the sea, under the ground, and in the air, remembered today as the mythological creatures of yesteryear. They evolved concurrently with the Cyclopean researchers, picking up many of the same habits, predominantly the desire to work together as peaceful explorers of their world, living in harmony with nature and yin-based technology to improve the performance of nature. For example, raising water tables to irrigate crops through forest management, rather than pumping water out of the ground and distributing it in ditches. Over time, the natural processes of the inner core of the planet and the sun cause many expansion events, cracking the single rocky mass into continents and expanding the rivers into lakes, the lakes into seas, and the seas into oceans. Just to mention that in Dr. Perret's model of planetary formation, and planets started out as being 100% land, and as the planet expanded, more water was introduced. And so he's saying that Earth ultimately is going to become a huge water planet with a bunch of islands, separated by, large expanses of water. Life continued to adapt to the new conditions, evolving and becoming more diverse. The field of consciousness generated by the Cyclopean researchers tended to mold the more advanced life into a similar bipedal form, giving rise to a large variety of species that had the image of the Cyclopeans, but in miniature. The race is known to the insider community as the LMs, or the little men, the mythological races of sprites, nymphs, fairies, dwarfs, and their kin. It is not known if the LMs were just a natural evolution of Tiamat, if they spawned from the life brought to the planet by the Cyclopeans, or if they were a hybrid of the two. What is known is that the LMs evolved from the lower forms on the planet. This has an interesting consequence that is unfamiliar to humanity. The LMs developed spiritually from the research drive of the Cyclopeans, but lacking a creator god, never developed the concept of religion, not being engineered as a slave race. They do not worship anything nor anyone. Their spirituality is based on the evolution of consciousness, which was how they came into being, just as human spirituality is based upon worship and servitude, which is how humanity came into being. The Cyclopeans, being the master builders of the universe, and I suspect Freemasonry has some of their concepts from the Cyclopeans distorted by rivalry, took advantage of the expanding planet and the new territory being made available within the depths of its interior. The structure of planets is much like that of arcs and white dwarf stars, having a hard crustal shell, then a diminishing density gradient with a hollow interior. But in the case of planets, which are living organisms, that hollow center exists past the ultra-high-speed range described by Larson. It is cosmic, existing in 3D time, appearing inside out to 3D space dwellers. If one were to enter the hollow core, they would actually find themselves on the surface of the cosmic aspect of the planet, its soul. And that's what the Cyclopeans did. Since their vibrational technology allowed for easy and compatible access to this realm, being assisted by the LMs, who were always interested in discovering new things. Okay, now I'm guessing we should just continue. There's just a few more paragraphs here. It was within this hollow core, the surface of a cosmic world, that the Cyclopeans constructed their monastery and archive, a record of their journey across the cosmos and the path to ascension out of the octave. As a legacy for the LMs and other life that may develop, this monastery, surviving in mythological records as Agartha, protected the elementals and underground dwelling LMs, became the Cyclopeans' final departing point for the Theta octave. They were in no rush to ascend. There was still a lot to learn in this octave, and for them, it was about learning, growth, and the evolution of consciousness. The passage of time did not matter to the Cyclopeans, as they had already evolved past the need for the cycle of reincarnation, except in the case of accidental death, and were technically immortal. So, with cities in the mountains, on the surface, and a repository of knowledge and sanctuary deep in the hollow core of the planet, they had completed this research outpost and could get down to serious work. For them and their kin, many of whom were still scattered about the galaxy. But a mere million years into their research project, strange lights were seen in the sky. Visitors from another solar system close by. The Titans had arrived. Okay, and then it says to be continued next week, same time, same channel. I'm hoping I can find the second part of this article, if such a thing exists. But that's the end of this article. So we will figure it out, and we will either start reading the continuation of this article, or we will move on to something else. So that'll give you a reason to stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.